welcome back to my channel. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So today I have a really exciting video. Today is going to be the first video of a new series on my channel called the Bad Girls Book Club, and in this series we're going to be talking about all things book related. Today I kind of have a bit of a controversial video to start off this series, and I'm going to be talking about one series in particular that I think could have been as good and as big as Harry Potter. But before I get into that, I just want to clarify a couple of things. If I do look the same as last video, that's because I filmed this on the same day, and in that video I filmed a getting ready with me for filming and just kind of what makeup I do for YouTube. Also, I will add, today is a bit of a gloomy day and it's also raining, so sorry if you hear any rain noise in the background, but I also kind of figured that maybe that would just add to the aesthetic of a book club. So before you get started with this video, because I'm sure it's going to be a long one, grab yourself a coffee, a drink if you are of age, and let's sit and chat about books. Okay, so for this video I actually have notes on my iPad because I am taking this very seriously. So the first thing, you're probably wondering, what book series do I think could have been as good as Harry Potter? And that is Percy Jackson and the Olympians. I know. I read Percy Jackson and the Olympians, I think it was back in 2009, 2008, a really long time ago. I think I was in the 7th grade. My friend got me into the series because we were both kind of like the weird, like nerdy girls in our class, and I remember she was also really into kind of Greek mythology, and she was like, hey, you need to read this book, it's so cool, it kind of reminds me of Harry Potter. So I was like all for it. So just to give a bit of a background as to what Percy Jackson and the Olympians is, if you haven't heard of it already, which, I mean, how can you not hear about it? Basically, it's about this, I think he's 13 when the series first starts, and through a series of weird events he figures out that he is actually half human, half descendant of a Greek god, and it follows his journey on figuring out what that's like. It kind of reminds me of Harry Potter and him figuring out that he's actually a wizard. It's kind of the same concept. He makes all these new friends who also half mortal, half Greek, descendant of a Greek god, and he goes through all these cool adventures, journeys, battles, everything, just kind of fighting with some creatures from the underworld as well. And it's just a really cool series. It also kind of covers a lot of just general things that teenagers go through. It's a really cool book. I cannot stress to you enough. That's just a brief summary about what it's about, but if you do need a more extensive summary, I will leave a Wikipedia page in the description. But let's just get into the reasons why I think this book could have been as good as Harry Potter, but it wasn't. Honestly, I think this book was so good, and I think generally because it was kind of written about this very mysterious fantasy type world, kind of like Harry Potter, and the essence of like wizardry and with witchcraft and all that stuff, which is not something we had seen before, especially because with this book, I don't think, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm pretty sure this is the first, at least, book that I've seen that's written about Greek mythology specifically, and especially written about in a modern context. I honestly think this book was, well, I would say ahead of its time, but we'll get into that in a minute. It was really relatable to, I think, just teens back then. Like I said, I read this book, I think, in 2009. So by that point, I was about 13. I think. I don't know, I can't do math, but I was like about 13. I remember the book being so relatable. I haven't read it since, and I'm now 22, so it's been several years, so my recounting of the events is a bit sparse. But yeah, I just remember it being really cool. It was really funny, and I found the characters to be very relatable. It was still kind of suspenseful. It had a really good storyline, and because it was a series, it has 5 books in the series, and I've read all of them. Each book had like a different dilemma that was going on, so it made it really interesting. And I remember each book had like a really good cliffhanger, so it was really like addicting to get to the next one. And because also, I may add, throughout the series he does kind of increase in an age as you did with Harry Potter. It felt like you were growing up with him, and each book you were really excited to read because each book he was a different age, if that makes any sense. So I just thought it was really, really good. It was really easy to follow, it was really easy to read, and it was really easy to get hooked up onto. So something about the series that I really liked that was a bit different from Harry Potter and Twilight and all of those other series where the books weren't actually very long. So honestly, all the books were pretty digestible. They were about this big. The only bigger one was the very last one. It's a little bit thicker, but honestly they weren't very long. I know with Harry Potter, as you get further into the series, the books do get bigger, and same with like Lord of the Rings. And I remember, I think it was Twilight, the books were huge. Or for example, like Vampire Diaries, that series was really, really long. So it was just very easy to read, especially when you're like 13 and your attention span is just not long. It was really great because the books themselves were actually quite readable. So I'm going to jump into why I think it could have been as popular, but it wasn't. It was really weird because, like I said, I think Percy Jackson and the Olympians at the very least had everything that Harry Potter had. Like, it had the fantasy world, it had the characters, it had, you know, the spell, well, not necessarily the spells, but kind of, it had the adventure, it kind of had the good guys, bad guys type situation. I know a lot of the books dealt with like the underworld and like all that stuff. It had the drama, it had some type, it had like a little friend group in it too, that so you can follow them along. It had everything that Harry Potter had, but it just wasn't as successful. And I think a lot of it, I remember writing in my notes, it was like, I feel like Percy Jackson and the Olympians had an almost secret fandom. Anytime I mentioned this series, it was almost an afterthought. People were like, oh yeah, I do kind of remember that book, but it never really was one of those things where, you know, if I mention, hey, Harry Potter, you automatically know what I'm talking about. If I mention Twilight, you know what I'm talking about. The Hunger Games, Vampire Diaries, like you just know. But when it came, and probably in any book discussion, Harry Potter came up. But anytime I've had a discussion about books with anybody and I mentioned Percy Jackson and the Olympians, they were like, wait, yeah, I do remember that book, and I actually did really like it. And I just thought that was so odd because I feel like no one talked about this book ever. But if you did mention it, a lot of people have read it, and a lot of people were actually really big fans of the entire series, but it just wasn't talked about. It was almost like a secret fandom. I also really think, you know, part of the secret fandom issue was, I remember, like I said, back when I read it, I think in 2009, at the time, the only social media I used was Facebook, and I think MSN Messenger. If you're Canadian, you know what I'm talking about. So there was no Tumblr pages. There probably was, but I wasn't familiar with them. And a lot of, like I said, the book was more geared towards a YA audience. So at the time, there really wasn't Tumblr pages for it. There was no like Twitter for it. There really was no pages. And so to connect with other people to bring popularity to the series just didn't exist. Like, it just didn't exist. It wasn't until after I was in college that I was like not even college, like in high school and in college, when I was talking to other people and I was like, did you remember reading Percy Jackson and the Olympians? And they're like, yeah, I do actually remember reading this book. Whereas I think with Harry Potter, there's so many Tumblr pages, Instagrams, Twitters, Facebooks, blogs, just general, probably even, I could imagine there was probably Harry Potter conventions somewhere that were able to kind of get all the people who were fans of the book together in one spot and just generally get the book and the series talked about in the way that Percy Jackson and the Olympians, they just didn't have. A really big thing, and I think it has a lot to do with social media as well, but there was no merch when it came to Percy Jackson and the Olympians. Like, I'm sure there was, but like I said, I didn't see any at the time, and I'm sure, because I know if there was, I probably would have bought it. I was very much into this book world, and there just wasn't, I remember there wasn't any merch in the way that there was with Harry Potter and the Hunger Games. I know the Hunger Games had those like little pins. Do y'all remember that? I remember my friends used to wear those all the time. There was no t-shirts in the way that Vampire Diaries did. You know, for Percy Jackson, there was literally no merch at all, which I think is really important. I mean, I will mention all the time, I'm a marketing major, and I do feel like having merch, especially when it comes to books and to movies, is really important, because then you can like look at people and be like, oh my god, you wrote Percy Jackson and the Olympians, or you've seen the movie. Like, okay, let's connect. Let's find other people who, you know, get into the series and make it more popular. But because at the time there was no merch, there was nothing. No one knew that you read the book. So it was just like this secret underworld fandom. Like, no one talked about it other than me and my friend at the time, and my school. Literally no one read the book. It was actually depressing because it was so good. So another really big thing I think has to do with why this book was just not as popular, and I think this fact is probably the biggest contributor to this, is the movie was so bad. There was 2 movies, and like I said, this book has 5 books and there's only 2 movies made about the first book and the second book. So I'll just talk about the first one because I actually haven't seen the second one. That's how bad the movies were. So anyways, me and my friend were so excited when the movie was coming out. We're like, yes, finally we get to see Percy 3D, girl. I was so pumped. 13-year-old me was so excited. We go to see this movie and it was almost as if the people who made the movie just didn't read the book. A lot of it was just so not what was going on in the book. Like, I think at one point in the movie they went to Las Vegas, and I'm like, I genuinely don't recall that ever happening in the book. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty positive they never went to Las Vegas. They didn't go to no casino. Like, it was just so bad. Just generally the movie was really bad. It was extremely Hollywoodized to the point where it was just hard to watch. Even if you've already read the book, it was hard to get behind the movie. It was just so bad. I think I remember me and my friends going to Tim Hortons after and having a huge discussion about why this movie was so awful. Actually, fun fact, I was doing research for this video and there's an article about how Rick, what's his name? I should know this. Rick Riordan, the author of the series, actually hated the movies. Like, he thought they were literally awful. That says a lot, and I'll explain to you why I thought the movies were so bad. I think just generally, I don't think the people who made the movies did any research on the book at all. I remember the characters were so different. One of the huge issues, I think, was the main character who played Percy in the movie was significantly older than Percy in the book. That was one of the huge things that bothered me about the movie. Like, literally, I think it was Logan Lerman who played Percy Jackson. He literally, I think when the movie came out, he was probably about 16 or 17.
So it turns out that Logan Lerman was actually 18 when the movie first came out, which makes this whole point even worse. I do know that later on in this video, I do get a lot of the ages mixed up, but my point still stands, and it was still bad.
But the way, for example, in comparison to Harry Potter, right? When Harry Potter first came out, when Daniel Radcliffe and, you know, Emma Stone, Emma Watson, and all of them played the characters, they were the same age as the characters in the book. So that made it really easy to film them progressively as the series went on, right? But with Percy Jackson and the Olympians, Logan Lerman, when he played Percy, I'm pretty positive was 16 or 17, which is kind of problematic when you think about it, because he did not look 13 or 17. I'm 13 years old. There's a lot of times where an actress who's significantly older than the character that they're playing pulls it off, but because Logan Lerman was just so much older than Percy, like, he genuinely didn't look 13, and so when it came to making the next couple movies, it became problematic, because for the second book, for example, he was supposed to be 14. I think at that point Logan Lerman was already 18. Like, how is that gonna work? Just simple things like that to me was just so irritating, because it's like you can tell they just did not do their research on the book and found actors and actresses that complemented the series well. Not only was it bad, but I think the producers or whoever was responsible for releasing the movie could not have picked a worse time to release a movie. I'm pretty sure, I think the movie was released in 2011, I think, or 2010. I think it was 2010. Oh my gosh, can I talk? In 2010. And I think around that time there was, you know, the Hunger Games movies were being released. Harry Potter was also releasing the last movie in the series, and I remember it was a part 1 and part 2 series. I remember because I saw both. I know Harry Potter was releasing its movies, Twilight was releasing a movie, the Hunger Games was releasing a movie, and those are 3 huge huge franchises. Like those are like probably one of the biggest franchises at the time. And so if you're gonna release a new series that a lot of people haven't really been talking about, you gotta make it good. And because it just wasn't good, I also feel like the movie just got lost in all the other franchises and it just didn't end up being popular at all. And I think another really big point that I put in my notes as well, I also feel like with series, especially with books that end up becoming a movie, there's the group of people who read the book and then there's a group of people who only watched the movie. And so if you're one of the people with this Percy Jackson series who only watch the movies, you're automatically gonna have a bad impression of the book and you're not gonna read the book, and there goes the popularity factor of the series, which sucks. I do think in general if they had released it at a different time, which is why at the beginning of this video I said I almost feel like Percy Jackson was just ahead of its time. I just feel like, or maybe not ahead, maybe they just should have waited to release the movie. I think that's the really big key to this as well. Another really huge part about the movie that I think just really hurt the entire series in general was they waited so long to make the second movie. I think the second movie was released in 2013, which generally isn't that bad, but because they took so long to do the second movie, which was even worse, I didn't even watch the second movie, let's put it that way. But like I mentioned before, the issue with having characters that are older than what is the age of the characters in the book. In the first movie, I think Logan Lerman must have been at least 16 or 17. So by the time they made the second movie, he was like 19, 20 years old. Like, how are you gonna look 14 if you are 19, 20 years old? It's just impossible. It's impossible. Like, how are you gonna look 14 if you're 18, 19, and 20 years old? Like, it's just impossible. And there's 5 other books, and you waited 3 years to release the second movie. Like, people have already forgotten about Percy Jackson as it is. Like, and you're gonna wait to release the movie 3 years after the fact, and it's not good. Like, who is responsible for that? If you are watching this video, I would like a word, because that was just like, come on. You would see, for example, with like Hunger Games and with Twilight and with Harry Potter, like they were releasing movies like back to back to back so that the ages of the actors in the movie matched up with the ages in the book. But they didn't do that with Percy Jackson and the Olympians, and I really think it hurt the entire series, the entire popularity of the series. A really quick point at the very end is, do I think it can be saved? And what I mean by that is, do I think, and do y'all think, the Percy Jackson series can regain popularity and be just as big as Harry Potter again? And I honestly don't know. I think yes and no. I feel like yes, because you've seen it before. I've always seen it with superhero movies or that Marvel franchise, for example. I mean, Superman and Superwoman and all those Marvel movies have been around for ages, and it's about recently when they started to remake them, and I almost feel like they have the capacity. I think it's been enough time since the last Percy Jackson movie has been released that they can actually remake the movie series, have new actors, new locations, actually read the series this time and re-release the movie. I think that they could definitely do that, but I think they're gonna have to do a lot of work to redo it. It's not uncommon for movies to get remade, and I honestly feel like they should remake it because the book series was so good, and I feel like the movie just didn't do it justice. And I think if that's your first time being familiarized with the Percy Jackson series, like you're not gonna like it, right? So I do feel like it could be saved if they remade the movies, one, and I also feel like if they had merged and just like had more of a fandom. I was on Pinterest the other day looking for some thumbnail pictures for this video, and I did see kind of a lot of fan art for Percy Jackson. So I do think, like I said, because of the presence of social media, I think there's now been kind of more of a fandom about the series. One thing Rick Riordan did do is he basically made several spin-off series based off of this book. I think he had one about Egyptian kind of stuff. I don't really know. I didn't read the spin-off series, but he did make several spin-off series that I think have done really well and have been able to get more of a following. So I do think it could be saved, but it just depends on, I think, the movie franchise, and I think without a movie it's basically done. At the same time, I do kind of feel like it can't be saved. I just feel like it was just one and done. I think they just messed up too badly for them to try remake it. At the same time, I feel like if they they wanted to, they could probably do something with the other spin-off series that I was talking about. But I think part of me feels like Percy Jackson and the Olympians is just kind of done. It's gonna be one of those series where you kind of talk about it in passing when you're talking about books, but I feel like at the same time, I just don't think it would have been, it can be as popular as Harry Potter or Twilight or the Hunger Games. Maybe they had a window of opportunity, and part of me feels like it's just past. Like there's just no going back from those two really shitty movies. That's my book series videos. That was so fun and so exciting talking about Percy Jackson Olympians. This is definitely a topic that I've wanted to talk about for so long, but my camera's actually dying, so I'm gonna hurry up and finish this outro. So if you have other books that you want me to talk about, or other books that you want me to do a review about, leave me a comment down below and I will try my best to get to them. But yes, leave me your opinions about this topic down below. I would really love to know if there's any of y'all who've read Percy Jackson and Olympians and feel the same way that I do and feel like it could have been as good as Harry Potter, but it just wasn't. But yes, I'll see you guys in my next video. Stay tuned and keep your notifications on for when I upload a new meeting for my Bad Girls Book Club. So I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye.